Your financial reality as a brand is sales on the P&L, ad spend on the P&L. It doesn't make in-platform attribution useless.
It's a tool to allocate budget, not a tool to decide budget. A one-liner that I believe to be true with these attribution tools.
Whoever's pushing the buttons on the media buying, they've got to understand the business outcomes that they're driving.
You want to have one core team that's responsible for the allocation of dollars between your ad platforms because they have the context to what you're trying to achieve as a business.
That is the starting point of assessing if they're doing their job or not. All right, episode 57. I am excited to get schooled by Dylan today. Dylan, attribution, do's and don'ts.
I'm gonna go get my crystal ball. I'll be right back. Gonna feel the vibes on how performance is today. The do's and don'ts of attribution. It's everyone wishes there was one metric to rule them all, you know?
Or one platform, right? North Beam, Triple Whale, whatever, like Prescient. There's something out there that's gonna give me perfect attribution. Checkout Champ, that's the latest one that I keep hearing about. And like product specific funnels, ad channel specific funnels. But yeah, this is gonna be a good one. So what I really I want to get straight to the point here, and I want to debunk the myth on perfect attribution and whether it's possible or not, because for whatever reason, post iOS 14, everyone knew it wasn't really happening anymore. But I've heard it in the last few months. I hear brands saying that they found a tech tool that is rekindling their hope of this perfect ad spend attribution. So I want to kind of debunk that myth. And then the second one is I want to talk about what attribution methods should be used in what context. Because to me, I think that's what's important. It's not that attribution is pointless or completely useless. It's just that you got to be careful about the context within which you use it. So first point that I want to get into, Dylan, are there any tech tools out there that overcome iOS 14 now that we're in the age of AI in 2026 that can solve our attribution woes?
No. I don't even think pre-iOS 14.5 had all the solutions. I just think it often, especially compared to the immediate months that followed, it just reported more sales. So, every attribution setting or platform is a tool in your toolbox to try to better allocate dollars against a business outcome you're trying to drive for. There are two principles that almost always apply, at least in 2026. I guess incremental attribution is new, but I think these two statements generally still apply. Most brands would be better served assessing their media spend in two ways. One is just all your new customer revenue divided by ad spend. This does not work when you have a lot of organic or influencer or non-paid
for sure
new customer revenue. But we've worked with over 150 brands, and more often than not, at least still today, brands are ad spend first. So even if 5% of your new customer sales come from some other channel, it's close enough. You want to have your new customer performance holistically reviewed. And if, let's say it's affiliate, you could even tack on your affiliate commissions into your ad spend if you wanted to. But at the end of the day, because the game of D2C is CAC to LTV, you want to make that your end all measurement. So the next layer is, well, how do I make sure that if I'm looking at everything at such a high level, how do I make sure what I'm doing in the ad accounts actually are the right thing to do? Because if I have that high level metric, how do I think about my in-platform CACs or my in-platform ROAS or whatever? And the best advice I can give is that you're at any given time trying to correlate back what you're experiencing in platform to your new customer realities, in terms of let's say that your new customer ROAS store-wide is 1.5, and in platform you're trying to target new customers only, and on a 7-day click basis you're at a 1.2. it's possible that actually underreports conversions slightly because it's 7-day click and Meta's not perfect. And that actually is closer to that 1.5 you have as a store. So as you're increasing spend, you're trying to look at the relationship between those two metrics. So I'd say that no matter what attribution setting you use, you're always trying to correlate it back to that new customer outcome. That's like one general rule that almost always applies. And then the second one that almost always applies, specifically for paid social, is click only attribution. So um, oftentimes click attribution is more correlated with net new demand. View attribution tends to be very bottom of funnel heavy. Not always, but often, or the majority of the time. So if you follow the two principles of store-wide measurement and click-only attribution, for most brands between 5 and 50 million bucks a year in sales, that's going to serve you very well. I've seen like terrible stuff done with view attribution, both over-reporting conversions and also hindering scalability. So like it is real, especially for brands with a lot of return customers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the key takeaway is figure out what metric you're going to use to track what you're calling the new customer reality, or like the outcome you're trying to drive in new customers. You can do it new customer ROAS, you can do CAC, you can look at new customer contribution margin dollars, but like figure out some way to track the in-platform metrics against changes in those metrics, right? And like, although I'm a D2C specific CFO, I'm not in the ad platforms. But when I have I actually was talking to a brand last week that was like, hey, they pulled open their Facebook ROAS and they were showing me what it was. And they're like, I don't understand why the business is like this brand was hemorrhaging money. I did a CFO audit and they're like, why are we losing so much money? I'm like, guys, that Facebook ROAS has nothing to do with what your actual, I'll call it P&L ROAS. I've never used that term before, but like actually using sales numbers that tie out to your P&L as opposed to reported attributed sales, right? In platform. And furthermore, they were going like, hey, we're spending this much on Meta, and this is the Meta ROAS, and we're spending this much on Google, and this is the Google ROAS. How come these numbers don't add up to like what's on the P&L? And like, because they have their own tracking, and you'll get tons of duplicated, you'll get duplicate reported sales where there's sales that both Meta and Google take credit for. And it was like blowing their mind. They were legitimately using that to try to forecast. They were basically taking Meta spend times ROAS plus Google spend times ROAS in platform and saying, that's how much sales I think we're doing. And then they go back to Shopify and go like, we're doing less sales than that. What's going on here? The point I'm making, if you do this math at any point in time, it will not add up to your financial reality. Your financial reality as a brand is sales on the P&L, ad spend on the P&L. That's your financial reality. You have to somehow tie it back to your actual P&L reality. Now, another really important thing that Dylan just said is that it doesn't make in-platform attribution useless, right? But it has to be put in context of your P&L reality. Do you have any advice, Dylan, for like, in addition to what you've already run through, do you have any other like kind of simple best practices, attribution do's that brands should consider?
If you're working with a good agency or have a really good in-house CMO, head of growth, etc., you just probably shouldn't care that much about the in-platform attribution if you're running the brand. I think that when the founder has media buying experience, it's good. And if you have media buying experience, then great. Maybe you can get more into the weeds. But more often than not, I find this kind of rabbit hole to be a relative waste of time for brand founders, because once you go the layer deeper beyond new customer sales divided by spend, you get into so much nuance that I'd say maybe it's important to understand, and hopefully I can give some context to it here in a second. But if you're like tracking it all the time, you're probably just like wasting your time. That's why
Totally.
that's why you have a media buyer or an agency or an employee to do that for you. Basically, like let's say you use one of the well-known third-party attribution tools. Um, what those tools give you is they give you various attribution models, which essentially is, in another word, is like a specific set of rules associated to the tracking of conversions. So for example, Meta by default does 7-day click purchase windows. So Meta will do its best within 7 days of a click occurring to track a sale back to an ad campaign if it occurs. Now, it's not perfect. It'll miss some. The benefit of, say, a third-party attribution tool is you might be able to track various types of rules. Was it the first click ever tracked by that customer? Was it the last click ever tracked by a customer? Was the attribution time window unlimited? Was it 3 months? Was it 1 month? You have more optionality. And the benefit of all these data points is, as a media buyer trying to allocate dollars within an ad platform or between ad platforms, you can look at those metrics to try to draw correlations to the end outcome you're trying to drive overall in the business. So none of these metrics are used to actually give you an ROI on your media spend. They're simply used to allocate dollars when you're happy with the ROI you're experiencing on the P&L level. That is it. So a lot of people, I think, buy these tracking tools thinking, oh, I'm going to finally know what my ROI is. No, you're probably just going to be more confused about what your ROI is unless you actually use this stuff a lot. It's a tool to allocate. It's a tool to allocate budget, not a tool to decide budget. That's like a one-liner that I believe to be true with these attribution tools. And incrementality is a whole other can of worms. It's not technically attribution, but same general idea is it's, I guess with incrementality, you're trying to measure performance a little bit more, but it's still just another tool in the toolbox. You still should generally care the most about the business-wide outcome.
I think that is the point. Media buyers or your growth marketing function needs to understand the connection of what they're doing to business outcomes. And I don't know if it's a ecom specific thing that people are so enamored with the data that's available in platform.
It is.
That's just, there's an obsession with it. There always has been. I mean, a decade ago when I was doing this stuff, everyone was just as obsessed with it, right? And that's not the case in every vertical outside of ecom, that kind of data availability.
I thought about this a lot, Jon. I think the reason why, and I'm not saying it's wrong, by the way, there's actually valid reason. It's because the path from click to purchase is so fast.
For sure.
And if you're selling B2B SaaS, you don't run an ad that launches today, you see sales that same day. The sales cycle might be months. Because consumer direct response conversions can happen so fast, I think it trains people to be, hyper focused into the data. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can totally be a bad thing.
Definitely.
At a certain point, you have to decide what data is worth referencing, because you can definitely analysis paralysis. I see it all the time. That one of our core responsibilities is to help brands not have analysis paralysis. For sure.
And help them understand the connection back to the business outcome, right? So if you're a brand founder and you feel like your ad buying team does not understand the business outcomes that they're driving, that is a huge red flag. And I'm calling that out because I see that constantly, Dylan. I can't tell you how many brand founders I talk to where I am looking at their data. I am looking at their marketing performance through a financial lens. You want to know more about that? Click back one episode and listen to that because we got into the weeds on that. But I will do our analysis on marketing, and I can tell the media buyer doesn't understand the business outcomes just from looking at new and returning customer contribution margin. I'm there's absolutely no way whoever's running media buying understands what they're doing. And so you need to take that away with a lot, take this point seriously. If you feel like your media buying team does not understand the connection to business outcomes, you should confirm that hunch is true. And if it's so, you need to make a change. I recommend this all the time as a CFO. The other thing is that think about in-platform attribution for what you should do. This is maybe an oversimplified way. If you think I'm wrong by what I'm about to say, Dylan, you can tell me because I'm not in these platforms all the time. But when a brand asks me as a CFO, well, then what do I use the in-platform metrics for. Like, that's used to understand if ads and campaigns and whatnot are working better than the alternatives, right? That is not there to help you assess how it's going to impact your P&L. So like, whoever's the button pusher should definitely understand what's going on with in-platform metrics, because they can say this campaign's working better than this one. This ad set's working better than this one. You need someone doing that. But that doesn't mean that same metric drives the forecast of how you think you're going to drive the business outcome, which in this case is the P&L.
One other kind of big thing with attribution, and I agree with what you said there, is one of the hardest things to do is compare platforms to one another. So platforms.
Oh yeah, I want to hear about this. This is juicy. Tell me about this a little bit. I'm curious.
So platforms have different default attribution settings often. Sometimes they're similar, but even then different platforms behave differently. Like one might have more spillover to Amazon than the other. One may have on average longer path to purchase. Like oftentimes Google path to purchase is fast because it's intent based or more intent based, because let's say you're selling, I don't know, coffee mugs. Someone searches coffee mugs. I'm looking at a coffee mug. They're probably looking to buy soon. Whereas with Facebook, there's probably a higher probability that the distribution of how many days it takes someone to purchase may be longer. The longer the path to purchase, often the higher the probability that a conversion goes untracked. It's often more likely that if someone clicks an ad and then buys that same session, that the platform will actually accurately track versus miss a conversion. So when you compare all these platforms to each other, it's a never-ending game as well of what is the optimal media mix. And there's media mix modeling. There's tons of different ways to try to assign what is the optimal split of spend between all these platforms. But what I see like the most frequent issue is the concept of having different agencies or different teams run different platforms for you just doesn't make any sense. Because
no, it doesn't make any sense at all.
The only way it makes sense is if you have a CMO or a head of growth who can actually organize them all. But the sheer cost of doing all of the above usually probably is reserved for brands high in the 8 figures, maybe into the 9 figures, if you actually want to get good siloed teams doing each channel. And even at that point, I would just make the argument that there's probably a better way to allocate your fixed costs to get a higher ROI.
I will say I have seen the exact scenario that you're talking about a few times, and that head of growth, the skills and the experience that it takes to be able to manage those siloed teams, this is not an easy skill set to find. I have seen a couple people do it successfully. Both of them used to be media buyers themselves, so they actually very heavily they understood at a very detailed level what should be done across those platforms. But I still think that yields other questions about like, okay, but still, why is that? There's got to be let's put it this way. There's got to be a good strategic rationale, in my opinion. If you ask like CFO, should I structure my team this way? I would say there's got to be a really solid strategic rationale about why having a full-time person overseeing these siloed agencies creates some sort of leverage or like somewhere in the business. I'm not saying the case can't be made. I'm saying you need to make that case, right, for it to be worth it.
And it's probably because you're trying to lock in someone exceptional who doesn't want to basically be the person fulfilling everything, but wants to sit as like a more senior executive on the team. And like, you're probably looking at $200,000 to $400,000 a year, depending on how experienced that person is, to get someone who's actually really, really top notch to actually run those teams. Not to mention the siloed costs. So like, if you compare that to other kind of cost models, like, you have to be very big for that to make sense, because even if that person is, or that team in aggregate outperforms the other option by, I don't know, 10 or 15%, you have to be a certain size to kind of clear the fixed cost burden you're choosing to incur as a function of running that org structure. So like, at Aplo, most of the brands you work with are between $5 and $50 million a year. There's some that are smaller, there are some that are bigger. But specifically in that 5 to 50, you just probably can't afford to do that model And if you can, you're probably leaving money and opportunity costs on the table, because there's probably a better way to allocate those fixed cost dollars. And with AI, candidly, like I think that like more and more that number is just going to go up, where it's harder and harder to justify these more complex team structures because the execution is becoming more commodified. So again, I've seen it work. I've just like more often seen it not work. So I generally say like you want to have one core team that's responsible for the allocation of dollars between your ad platforms, because they have the context to what you're trying to achieve as a business. Alternatively, you have one person on your team who's overseeing multiple team members or teams, and you're kind of controlling the flow of spend between different teams at any given time. I'll say one other general rule of thumb is that you can sort of get away with the multiple team thing if you're first time customer dominant and you're first order profitable, because whether a channel gives you 15% contribution margin dollars or 5% contribution margin dollars, it may not matter as much. But if you're losing money on acquisition and you're thinking about, I can only spend so much at a loss this month, you have to all of a sudden care a whole lot more about your media mix versus if you're just making money hand over fist on order one. So, and even then, I'd still rather, make the better ROI decision and just have better allocation. But the opportunity cost is arguably greater, I think, in the high LTV cases.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think that if you're truly new customer dominant, where basically we'll call it, 6 to 12 month LTV is basically first order AOV, you're not worried so much about like wherever you're basically just measuring blended MER or full funnel ROAS or sales divided by ad spend, more or less. That's what you're measuring. And it's just a lot easier to think about measuring that than it is to think about like, how am I doing on new customers versus returning customers? And I'm spending in multiple channels, potentially also having multiple sales channels. So yeah, man. Well, this is a good one. But when to kind of bring the A word back into conversation sometime soon. Yeah. Any final thoughts on your end, man?
If you're the founder, you want to try to stay as high level as possible with the kind of business-wide metrics you're optimizing for. But in order for that to be true, you have to work with teams or team members who understand the objectives and understand how to optimize towards those objectives in platform. So if you have a team and you feel like you can't change for some reason, you might have to, figure it out yourself. But in general, you should probably just work with people who can guide you to the business, guide you in a way that correlates the ad accounts to the business objectives you're trying to drive.
Yep, absolutely, man. I love it. My final thoughts are just a reiteration of like your growth marketing team, and maybe even more specifically, whoever's pushing the buttons on the media buying, they've got to understand the business outcomes that they're driving. Probably most importantly, it's the P&L outcome. If you want to get even more granular, it's the contribution margin dollars that they're generating every single month. So if you really want to measure how your marketing team is doing, or most specifically your ad buying team is doing, measure contribution margin dollars by month over time against ad spend, and that is the starting point of assessing if they're doing their job or not. So anyways, this was a great one, and episode 57 in the bag. Let's go.